Greetings, this is the Question GM for RPG Day 2020, and today is day 20, and the word of the day is investigate. So investigations is probably one of types of play that we would like to engage, especially in a for certain kinds of players to a fantasy role playing experience, typically D&D. My experience with investigation games, especially in the D&D context, has been really hard to do. It's really difficult. Not only because how investigation can be made more interesting is not really sustained by the core mechanics of D&D in 5th edition, and I would think in almost any edition since 3rd edition. Conceit is that investigation is not main gameplay loops that D&D is designed for, and in some sense you could say that it's always up to the DM to really change things up to make investigation a viable way of play. So without having very powerful rules or robust rules to control investigation or make mechanics out of our investigations, I think the real challenge is actually falls mainly on to the DM or the GM into crafting a mystery, and that's actually not something very easy for someone who much prefer throwing monsters, designing traps, and having dynamic combat locations. When combat is the more interesting part of the experience, and having to suddenly think of investigations really out of the water in that sense. So it's definitely not in my nature to put investigation encounters or elements into my D&D game. It's not to say that I have not tried, but when I do, it tends to really run very badly because either it frustrates the players or it frustrates myself. It tends to have that very hate it or love it kind of dynamic, in the sense that when I make a mystery, it's either the PCs are going to take 2 minutes to figure it out or going to take 2 hours to figure it out. Depending how quick the PCs get to either of those points, then yeah, that's probably how they feel about investigations in my D&D games. So I think, yeah, investigation poses a really big challenge, especially in a game like D&D. And I've definitely been more interested in looking into more investigation-based role-playing games rather than trying to put that into my D&D games. Not really tried one, actual investigation-based role-playing game. Maybe Call of Cthulhu. Another one that I've heard really pretty interesting ways they mechanize investigations is Delta Green. I'm definitely still in a very early stage of learning the ropes of how to run investigation games, and also to maybe see the moving parts of what makes an investigation session tick, whether as a player or as a GM. Another thing I think we can talk about investigation, and since I've been talking about D&D for the past few minutes, is how D&D handles investigation. And if you read 5th edition, there actually is a skill called investigation, and the common situation or argument that revolves about investigation is arguable counterpart perception. So what's the difference between investigation and perception? Because if I'm looking for a trap, if I'm searching for traps, should I be making a perception check just to see how keen are my sensors in finding the trap, or should I make an investigation in relying on my common logic and wits and knowing where to look to find the trap? I guess in some ways it could be an option thing. You could make it an option in the sense that because both skills use different ability modifiers, perception using wisdom and investigation using intelligence. But if you actually read on the actual description of the investigation skill in the player's handbook, this is actually what it says. When you look around for clues and make deductions based on those clues, you make an intelligence investigation check. You might deduce the location of a hidden object, discern from the appearance of a wound that what kind of weapon dealt it, or determine the weakest point in a tunnel that could cause it to collapse. Poring through ancient scrolls in search of a hidden fragment of knowledge might also call for an intelligence investigation check. So if you just based on this actual ruling, its description itself, it's not necessarily based on senses. It's kind of sort of based on deduction as well. So this is probably something that may be overlooked by some DMs who can't really tell the difference between investigation and perception. And the best thing about the skill is that it actually provides quite a few examples of when is the appropriate time to use an investigation. Finding a hidden object is actually one that you would typically think it's uh, based on perception, but you can also use an investigation to deduce where the hidden object is rather than trying to find that hidden object. So, and then you have discerning appearance of a wound to determine the weapon. That's sort of some sort of forensic check in some ways, but you know, it's a catch-all skill for doing that sort of thing in a D&D setting. And you can even use like logic to determine like you know, like architectural integrity and that sort of thing. So I would suggest, I guess, you know, this I know this video seems a little all over the place. I would suggest anyone to really look into the investigation skill a little bit more properly, and then really think of new scenarios of how they could actually use it in their games. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mystery, but it can be a very useful bypass or a quick way to get to another point of the adventure by just making a successful investigation skill check rather than, you know, having to find the pieces together just to get to point A to point B. So I guess that's all I really have to say about investigation. I probably have a lot more to say, but without any real experience to talk about input investigations into our games and having satisfactory results as a GM or as a player, I think this is really something that I need more investigation on. So I guess that'll be all for RPG a day 20 for the word investigation, and I will see you on day 21.